Star Wars collectors, and welcome to another Bossk Bounty video. Welcome to episode 162 of Ask Boss Bounty. You know the drill by now. This is the weekly Q&A series that drops every Sunday, where I take your questions from the comment section below and do my best to answer them. So if you do have a question that you want answered next week, leave your question in the comment section below and hopefully you'll be featured. With all that being said, if you do happen to enjoy the video, don't forget to drop a like down below, as that really does help the video and the channel. And before we do get on to the questions, I did want to just bring something up about something that happened on the channel yesterday. A few of you sort of reached out to me and said, look, I've had this weird reply to my comment on your channel. Now, this is something that affects lots of channels across YouTube. I hope YouTube are going to do something about it, or do more about it basically, but essentially it's a scammer. So what they do is they reply to your comment with an account that looks a bit like my account. It has the same avatar, but the name will be different. So on this occasion, it had something about Telegram or something on there. And basically they want you to sort of reply to them and, you know, try and get this giveaway that I've given away. Just so you know, everybody on the channel that's watching right now, if there is a giveaway to be had, I will do it officially on the channel. You'll know it's happening, and I will tell you when the draw's going to be made and what have you, and how you'll be contacted and all that thing. I will never just randomly reply to a comment saying you are the winner of this giveaway, click on this dodgy link to sort of claim your prize or anything like that. So just be very wary about that sort of thing on the internet in general and on YouTube. These bots and scammers, they can be a bit of a menace sometimes. So as I say, if you see something like that, the best thing to do is just report it or delete it. Don't click on it or anything like that. And if you want to let me know that it's on there, that's great, because a few people did that and I managed to sort of block those accounts and remove those comments. But as I say, it's not just me that's affected, it affects lots of YouTube channels, and I apologise to everybody that's happened to. It should be quite easy to determine if it's me or a scammer, because essentially they can't really use my avatar with my exact name, and if you clicked on my name you would go through to my channel. So just be a bit wary on that front. Alright then, with all that being said, let's get on to the video and start with the first question. This is No Cave says, question for next week. Hasbro seem to be quite taken with the Clone Wars era, and with the 20th anniversary of the Clone Wars, it seems that they're going to continue down that path. What do you think of Hasbro possibly reissuing the select Clone Wars vehicles into the Vintage Collection? Some are actually quite topical again, thanks to the Bad Batch. We've seen the V-Wing fighter and the Republic attack shuttle, albeit Imperial. Hasbro went there once before with the ARC 170 and the V-Wing. I totally am up for that, to be honest. When I saw the V-Wing in the Bad Batch, I did have a look on eBay to see how much they're going for, and I think they're going for north of 250 for the Imperial version, which is obviously a bit much. So I'm completely open for them to put that one into the Vintage Collection, give it some weathering or whatever, you know, update it slightly if they possibly can. And of course there's other Clone Wars era vehicles that I would absolutely love them to do. The Turbo Tank is one that I would love to have in my collection. You've got the Republic gunship that I think a lot of people would like reissued. That one in the Vintage Collection goes for far too much money on the secondary market, so it would be good if they could reissue that one again. I'm sure a lot of people would like that. And there's like smaller vehicles as well, like the AT-RT for example. That would be pretty cool to have in the Vintage Collection. There's lots that they could do. Lord Unforgiven 90 says, hi BB, question for next week. What are your collecting goals for 2023, if you have any? And would you consider making a video like you did in 2021? I'm binge watching your older videos and came across that one and I found it really interesting. Thanks, and this is the way. Yeah, I have done those videos in the past, and I couldn't really do one this year because essentially my collecting goals have changed quite a lot since last year. Last year I managed to finish my original run of 96 figures loose, so that's done. I've changed my focus with my mint on cards now in terms of vintage. I no longer sort of have a scattergun approach and get the ones that I like. I'm actually just going for all of the different Bossk cards, basically, of all the different variant stickers and things like that. So that is a goal, but I don't think it was enough to make a video about, because essentially there's not really too much apart from the Bossk focus and, you know, everything and anything that the Vintage Collection have to offer, because obviously that is what I collect. There isn't really too much else to say. New Gun Ray says, question for next week. If Hasbro does an Ewok for TVC, which one would you want and why? I think for me it has to be Chief Chirper. I've said this one before quite a few times. Part of the original 96, he's the Chief. I always remember having that figure as a kid. Very common to get, you know, in the secondary market for a vintage one of Chief Chirper. And of course you've got the Saga Collection one of 2006. But I think, you know, Chief Chirper needs to be in the vintage collection, basically. Armless Walrus, which is a great name, by the way. Question for next week. Imagine this scenario. Hasbro announces the next 2 waves of figures, 4 in each wave. The first wave are all new sculpts of Luke, Han, Leia and Obi-Wan in their classic A New Hope outfits. The second wave is both Tonica sisters, Imperial Dignitary and Velkin Tazeri. How would you react? And for how long do you think this would keep fans happy until they start moaning about the next must-have figures? It would make me very happy, I've got to say. There's lots of figures that you've mentioned there that I personally want them to do. So that's how I would react. I'd be happy. In terms of how long it would stop fans moaning for, probably not long. And at the end of the day, I don't really think it's moaning. I think it's good to have conversations and polls and, you know, people just sort of expressing their wants and needs for their collection, basically. It's a community thing, this hobby. That's the part of it that I love the most, and I think it's healthy for people to sort of, you know, discuss and ask Hasbro for what they want. Andrew Al-Jujali says, hey BB, love the vids and figure reviews. Non-Star Wars question for you. Will you be reviewing the upcoming Indiana Jones line? And also, do you think there is any chance they might do a 3.75 inch Indiana Jones figure line? I was really bummed when they revealed the line but said the figs were all in 6-inch scale. Thanks. So I will be buying the 6-inch figures and the retro figures, and I think if there is one of those that I'll maybe do a video on this channel, it would be the retro ones. I don't really fancy reviewing the 6-inch ones. I think there's plenty of channels out there that will do that for you, but I will be collecting them. I think they look great. Yeah, it was a bit annoying that they aren't going to be doing a 3.75 inch line, but I think they've tried that before, and I think they were just going to go for something new this time. And, you know, retro is everywhere. You know, whatever line you're collecting, they're trying to sell retro style figures, whichever company it is. And then obviously, you know, with the new film coming out, it gives them a chance to experiment with the 6-inch line for Indiana Jones. But so I don't think they will be doing 3.75, no. Rob Chewbacca Toys says, this was a really good video this week. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it, buddy. He says, I hate that I missed a live stream, but I will watch it later. Question for next week. What would you consider the best playset Hasbro could make in the $50 range? Oh, that's difficult. That's a difficult one. I think they could potentially do maybe like a Jabba's Dungeon for the droids. Give you a chance to get 8D8 and EV9D9. You could have like the power droid upside down on the sort of thing where he's being branded or whatever. You know, I think that would be a pretty cool thing. Maybe not for everybody, but in terms of $50, I think you could probably fill that out. What else would I like? I think they could maybe do a briefing room, update that. I think they're going to be doing a lot of the Imperial officers now. We've got that sculpt. I can see them sort of filling that out. So maybe to have that briefing room inside the Death Star, that would be pretty good. You know, I'm trying to think of things that are quite basic in terms of what's included, because $50 isn't really a lot. It's not going to get you a lot these days, you know what I mean? David Stevens says, hiya Tim, best wishes to the family. Question for next week. Looking at all of the March Madness top 25s makes me think that us fans all want very different things from Hasbro. If you were in charge of deciding what the next 30 TVC figures were going to be, how would you personally share out those 30 releases between new figures from the OT, prequels, sequels, animated shows, live action Disney Plus shows, Solo, Rogue One, Expanded Universe, Gaming Greats and Finish the 96? It's tough when you look at the number of figures released in a year and then try to share out those releases between all of the above. Should we have focus waves or possibly a HasLab Pulse only collector driven waves in addition to retail releases? So I would imagine that this part of their job is the hardest part, basically deciding what those waves are going to be, what figures they're going to be releasing, and it's certainly something that I don't envy them on, because as you say, we all want different things in the collecting community, that is for sure. I think what I would do is, in my opinion this is just my opinion, I would try and make sort of smarter choices in terms of like figures that go with other figures. So for example, I've got Chirrut Imwe standing there. You know, I was over the moon when they released him. I think it's a great figure. I love the card back and I love Rogue One. But I can't help but think that he's very lonely without Baze Malbus. Now, by the time that Baze Malbus comes out, if it's say this year, then that's maybe what, 4 years since Chirrut came out? Did he come out in 2019 or was it 2020? I can't remember. But it's going to be a long time since they've done that, right? So for me, that's too long. You know, it's almost like I don't really care anymore. And we've seen it recently with the Andor figures only getting a couple and they didn't even go together. You've got the same thing happening with the Obi-Wan series where we've got, you know, just a sprinkling of characters essentially that they don't go together either. And when I look at like the play sets, you know, if I was Hasbro and I was thinking about a play set, I would really consider the figures that are out there and the ones that they're going to be doing. So for example, these ones here, when the carbon freezing chamber came out, we didn't have any of those figures, I don't think. You know, Leia wasn't even on the box, if I remember correctly. So it's just things like that, I think. You know, I think with, say, 30 figures across the year, they actually make more than that, probably double that. So if they're doing, say, 60 figures in the year, I think that they can really sort of, you know, please everybody with a couple of figures here and there. But I think when they do that, they've got to sort of team things up a little bit, you know, put things together in bunches. I think it's a little bit too spread out. Another thing is that once they've got a decent sculpt of a figure, I think they should use it better. So look at these two awesome Sand Troopers that Daniel Chart put together from me, from the Fallen Order Stormtrooper. You know, I would much prefer to have those than sort of some blue and white figure from Battlefront 2, for example. So, I don't know. It's just about sort of being a bit more smart with it. I don't know, but I'm sure lots of other people have got their opinions about it. Aqualish Doug says, from the Mando Season 3 trailer, if we are getting non-Mandalorian figures, I hope it's not a Season 3 grief. I'd rather have some droids or Peli. Question for next week. Do you think the rumoured N1 Starfighter will come with a pack-in figure, and what would you like to see? I don't really know too much about that release. It hasn't been officially announced or anything, and obviously we're yet to see anything about it. So it could potentially have a pack-in figure. I'm thinking maybe not, because I'm thinking that that ship will be north of $100. I'm probably even thinking maybe north of $120. And I think when they're getting to that price, I don't think they like to put figures in them because, you know, it annoys the carded collectors. However, I do believe that they will be releasing figures that interact with that ship at some point this year. I think what they could potentially put in it is maybe a couple of pit droids, but not carded, just as like sort of, you know, extra accessories for the ship. I think it'd be wise for them to do that. Jay Russell says, hi Tim, question for tomorrow's episode if you haven't already recorded. It's literally just snuck in, don't you worry. He says, what are your wild speculations for the upcoming fan stream with the exciting special announcement from Hasbro? So this is the fan stream that's happening on Wednesday, I think it is. It's the 1st of February. Pretty sure it is. And what are my wild speculations? Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to hope for. I will hope that we get to see some of those pipeline figures that are going to be in pretty much the first wave of this year. And that's Piet, the Phase 2 Clone Trooper. I would like to see the Darth Vader that they did, and also the Han Solo from Endor. That would be great if we could see, you know, official images of those figures. That would be nice. In terms of the exciting special announcement, two things came to my mind when I saw that, because they do separate the exciting special announcement away from product reveals. I think they actually say we've got some product reveals and an exciting special announcement. So potentially it could be a HasLab. They could do what they did with the Razor Crest, where they announce there's going to be a HasLab rather than what the HasLab is, just to sort of build momentum and then reveal what that HasLab's going to be at another convention further down in the year or whatever. Or I also thought maybe because of all this news about Hasbro's profits and cutting staff and all that kind of thing, I thought perhaps the special announcement could be something actually quite boring, like, you know, we're reverting back to window packaging for the Black Series. I say boring, that would be very pleasing for Black Series collectors. Not for me so much because it doesn't really affect me, but I can imagine that that would be something that Hasbro thinks is a special announcement, you know. I hope it's not that. I hope it is something to do with like a big vehicle or the N1 or, you know, a future HasLab. That would be awesome. Scarecrow6 says, great video. Question for next week. With the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi coming up, do you think we'll get more TVC figures or playsets from the film? Maybe even more Jabba's Palace figures. So with that one, it's playsets, no. Figures, yes. Nathan Rosario says, question for next week. With the continued popularity of The Mandalorian and confirmation that Pre Vizsla will be in the new season, what do you think the chances are that Hasbro will go back to some of those Mandalore story arcs from the Clone Wars and give us figures like Pre Vizsla and maybe even Duchess Satine in TVC? I think Pre Vizsla is one that sticks out for me. I think it's done really well in last year's bracket, but more so that I think we've now got all of the parts for that figure in, you know, super articulated, really up-to-date figures. And essentially, I think really all they need to do is a new head for Pre Vizsla, and they've pretty much got him, right? I think that's a really good possibility, that one. Duchess Satine, probably not so much. Adam Berry says, hey Tim, question for next week's Q&A. What are your thoughts of the chances of getting a Star Wars HasLab this year? Well, a Star Wars HasLab, doesn't matter which line, but a Star Wars HasLab, I would have thought the chances are...
It's high.
Let's get going.
It's very high.
Rod C asks a question here about if we're going to be getting any underground Jedi. Lots of Jedi there, which I cannot pronounce. I'm not going to try. And he says he would really love to get the full council, or at least getting some of them. Unfortunately, I think we will have to wait until they've shown in another TV series. I think you've pretty much answered that question. I think that dictates a lot of it these days. You know, I think there always has to be like a hook for Hasbro to go back to something, you know. If, for example, with the Ahsoka series coming up, there are rumours that the Rebels characters are going to be in there. And I've always said if they're ever going to do the Rebels characters in TVC, they will need to show up in live action at some point, and that looks like that might be the case. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. Zamok Road says, good job, Little Bossk, on the display. Tim, question for next week. Seriously, what do you think the chances are we'll get more Inquisitors in TVC?
It's high.
Let's get going.
It's very high.
We got one and not even the best of the Inquisitors. We really need the Grand Inquisitor, at least in my honest opinion. Great live streams lately, and Ask Boss Bounty, always a joy. Haven't missed one since the mid-50s. Cheers, mate. Thank you for tuning in so often, buddy. I really do appreciate it. In terms of the Inquisitors, we've got the card backs for two of them. They're in the retro collection. I would have thought that Hasbro will want to do those in the vintage collection, but it goes back to what I was saying about, you know, what would I do if I was Hasbro? And the Inquisitors is just the perfect example. And the Bad Batch is a great example as well, with Hunter coming out. How long is it going to take for them to give us the other ones of that group? And that's what annoys me about sort of like the schedule for Hasbro, not teaming things up, not putting things together. And we have to wait like 3 years to complete the crew, if at all complete the crew, you know? So there you go. All right, there, guys, that's it for this week's episode 162 of Ask Boss Bounty. As I mentioned before, if you do have a question for next week's episode and you want to be featured in the video, leave your question in the comment section below. Watch out for those spammers and scammers on YouTube, as I mentioned at the start of the video. I want to say a big thank you to my Patreon supporters for supporting the channel in the way that you do. It really does help, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you all for watching, and we shall see you on the next one.